Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lori Clark Show. This episode of my podcast is brought to you with the help of Zoom Us, a video and audio conferencing interface. It's important to know that I'm in no way sponsored by Zoom. I just want to tell you how much I love it. It is very reliable, easy to use, and provides excellent audio and video files that my team and I produce to share the power of story with you. Another non-sponsored, couldn't do without, but just have to tell you how good it is Squarespace. When they say it is the all-in-one platform, it really is true. I go into the back end of my website multiple times a day, adjust things, post podcast, add links, and look at our show's analytics, which all sync across my devices. And when I need an image, Squarespace provides an excellent resource that's powered by Unsplash. Now for my most favorite feature, the Squarespace app. Being a working mom, there never seems to be enough time in my day. So when my daughter's in ballet, I sit in my car and upload, post, and manage everything on my website from the app. It's really cool and seamless. Squarespace is really, really simple and very dedicated to helping me create a brand of excellence. So with that, big shout out to Zoom, Squarespace, and Unsplash. Thank you for helping me tell people's stories. With that said, let's move on to the best part about today, the show. Please allow me to welcome my next guest on The Lori Clark Show. Welcome to today's episode, Hormones 101. Hormones are not just things that go nuts once a month. What happens in menopause when a woman is pregnant, raging as one enters her teenage years, or deplete as a woman moves on in age. Hormones are essential to the development and growth, balance, and healthy well-being of our bodies. If you are a young woman who has begun her period, is menopausal, curious, have given birth or considering giving birth, or maybe you're a mother of four like me, or perhaps you're a father with a daughter and wants to know more, or maybe you're curious about your own hormone health as a male, then this conversation is an important one. Here with us today is my friend and special guest. She is founding partner of Mountain View Wellness Center, co-publisher of Metanoia magazine, and worked in the field of hormonal health for over 20 years, and is passionate about this topic. It's my pleasure to welcome naturopathic doctor Allison Patton. Hello.
Hi, Lori. Thank you. Thank you for your lovely introduction. And I think we must have known each other for a number of years by now.
I was thinking like 18.
Yes, about that.
We both go like
Not
this.
to date us.
Oh, let's not talk about it. Let's say over 10.
Right. More than 3.
More than 3 years. It's a safe bet there.
Yes, exactly.
I really, I'm very excited about this topic because hormone health has just sort of reared its head for me, being 44 and moving on in my life. I am looking to you to guide us through hormone health because it's a very big web, I think, right? And so help us begin to understand, where do we start?
Right. Well, for me, it started in grade 7. And what I mean by that is we were studying the human body, and for whatever reason, I was given the endocrine system. So we were working in teams, and I was the team leader, and I was given the endocrine system, and it was a mixed group, ladies, guys, and we had to learn all about the ovaries, the testicles, the adrenal glands, and I thought, why me? Why me? Because some of my classmates weren't very comfortable, giving their talk on the testicles. Let's put it this way: when you're in grade 7,
right? Because in grade 7, it's balls.
Right. Yes, in grade 7, you don't even know what the word is, honestly. In our day, let's put it this way. Now maybe they're more knowledgeable to people out there. But so looking back, I thought, wow, I really got my start in hormones at age 12. And so I thought, well, it's not really fair. I got one of the toughest, systems to study, and why did I get given that system? But I guess it was a good place to start at 12, studying this, and now being a similar age to you, I can say I've been working on it for those many years. So I think I could say, if you're a teenager, mainly what might bring you into my office would be your mother.
Oh, I might be guilty of this. Dragging my kids in.
Because I'm very infrequently would I see a teen that just said, "Oh, please, could I go and see Dr. Patton for my hormones, Mom?" I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, that is Ireland.
And my daughter,
that's my daughter.
A teenager. Well, yes, maybe your daughter. She would have been, one of the only ones. But one time my daughter asked me questions about the ovaries, and I thought, are you sure you want to ask me about this? Because about 20 minutes later, she says, well, it wasn't actually 20, it was probably 3 minutes later. She goes, okay, that's enough. I've got enough. Thank you. So I don't know that the teens, they may want to know, but they may not want to know too much.
Right. But then here's the thing though, Allison, they might not want to know, but if they have a lot of acne, if they have, bloating and they're maybe going on the pill, or, they're feeling a lot of period cramps and they're not sleeping and they're, up at 2 a.m. and all that stuff and exhausted in the afternoon, maybe they're reaching out and saying, what is wrong? They might be Googling it, So I think this is why this is such an important conversation for teenagers to start.
Definitely. And a lot of them feel relieved when they do end up being brought in and they talk about the issues and get some information about what they can do about it. Then they do feel quite relieved because they have, knowledge is power. So then they can take action and improve the situation. Whereas before that, it was probably on their mind, bothering them, but they didn't know really where to turn or what to do about it. Yes, you can look it up. And just like my daughter makes face masks through her research online, you can find this out online, but it's helpful to be guided, because then you can have someone like myself or another professional say, well, based on what you've told me, this area is where you might want to focus, whether it be diet, whether it be hormones, whether it be stress glands, and then you don't waste your time, too much on it.
Is it common for women to not really know about hormones either?
It's a good point. Some women naturally research it, so they have an interest. Other women have no knowledge or connection to it and only are drawn to it when there's a real problem that happens and they can't, they're forced into it in a way. So there's a variety of individuals. One thing that we have that came ahead of us is the boomers. So they were the largest group going through menopause. And so they helped a little bit to change the conversation. But not all of them were asking the question. So I would say our particular age group might be more of a catalyst, working with the boomer ages and then the teenagers, trying to support both areas in improving their hormone health. So we may be more the unsung heroes of the story, really.
Too bad.
Yes, nobody will give us the credit, but we do end up doing a lot of the research, it seems.
Well, and we are really but my mom, as much as I love her and we are very good communicators, my mom didn't really talk to me about hormones. She talked to me about when her hormone health or, she had hormone imbalance, but I didn't really apply it to myself, until I sort of woke up one morning and I was like, I've had 3 children. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, and I ended up at your office, right? And that was way before I came to you with the adrenal fatigue issues. But so how do we jump into this conversation? Where do we start with just this how they work. How do hormones work in the body?
Well, you can think of a hormone as a messenger. So it would be sort of like a Snapchat message. So a person wants to communicate to their network, they might send out a snap, but a hormone is that snap going out to somewhere to do something and to communicate something. And that's what a hormone is. And so that's why they're so complicated, because a hormone goes out as a messenger and interfaces with a receptor, or like a lock and a key concept. And when it gets to that receptor can be anywhere in the body. It could be the brain, the blood vessel, the heart, the muscles, the kidneys, the liver, anywhere. And so then it can take an action. It can start a response in the body. And that's why it is so complicated, because there's a brain. It starts in the brain where the controller is, that travels to another level in the brain, and then it travels to the end organ that produces the hormone, and then that hormone then goes out and does a job. And so if you make a change in the system, you're impacting the whole system, and it's a complicated system. And that's why it's really hard to know always where to intervene, because you think, oh, I'll intervene here and it'll make that improvement, and you end up getting something else, an unintended consequence somewhere else. And you then think, oh, well, this is too complicated, forget it. And some people might not, they might give up a little too soon when they're trying to balance their hormones. Or one of my patients said to me, well, where do I go for my hormones? Do I go to you? Do I go to a hormone clinic? Where do I go? And I said, well, the thing is, anyone who's into hormones can help you, but you really have to hear what the person's telling you as the person. And then if you have the background knowledge, then it's not that it doesn't matter who you see, but a hormone clinic versus a very well-informed physician, naturopathic physician in the hormone area may be even more helpful than a hormone clinic, because it's the impact of the hormones on the whole body that matters, not just the hormone.
Some things that you might feel in the body would be breast tenderness. Maybe have mood swings. Maybe there's fatigue, low libido. There's some physical symptoms that you would kind of go, oh, that's strange.
Yes, and I do this talk in my clinic, and you can go through an inventory, and you can ask yourself, do you feel energized? Can you think clearly? Do you feel rested when you wake up? Is your waist circumference less than 35 inches? Do you feel moody? Are you grumpy? Does your family tell you, ooh, maybe you want to, talk to
chill
somebody
pill.
All right, maybe you want to go for a yoga class. And what about cravings? What about headaches? So depending on the age, there's different symptoms. With kids, it's often a stomach ache around the period, or a headache. So a little bit more of a physical symptom, even vomiting. So versus, let's say, yes, there's moodiness, but there might not be so much as waking up feeling less rested because of the age. I mean, with teenagers, they're mostly going to be asleep until noon unless they have to, type of thing, depending on the, teenager.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
But there's so when I was doing some research, and I've been to your clinic and I've listened to your talk, which I love it. It's great. The hormones are responsible to the brain to this chemical reaction in the body, right? And if that's the case, a lot of times you might experience that fuzzy brain fog because the brain is not getting what it needs. Is that?
Well, one of the things is when our hormones, so say our estrogen is dropping or there's an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone, one of the important factors called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which is responsible for strategic thinking, critical thinking, higher level thinking. That level goes down in our brain. And so we do feel hormone fog or menopausal, haziness, whatever you want to call it. But there's a physiological reason for it. It's not just oh, it's my hormones. The levels are actually lower. And, you do need to address it because it can lead to some challenges even in a work setting, for example, or in a school setting.
You've got estrogen, you have progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, and then you have other hormones like cortisol and the adrenal glands, which affect the adrenal glands and all of that, and pregnenolone. So how do all of those interact, and what do you do to begin the path of understanding some things like, oh, your estrogen and progesterone have to be in balance? What happens when they're not?
Right. Sometimes how a person begins to understand is they'll have something go on, like they'll be told through their physician they have cystic breasts, or they'll have endometriosis or infertility, or there'll be something that comes up that will say, what's going on? Why do I have this? And then they might come in to see me or somebody like that, and that person would say, well, likely there is an estrogen dominance going on, for example, because those types of conditions won't develop unless there is an estrogen dominance. And the person might do a test to figure that out as well if they want to prove it. Although, as I said, those conditions won't develop unless it's that situation. So if that's been diagnosed, then you already know that's going on probably. And you might confirm it or delve in deeper to the issue by doing a test.
Now, just want to touch on the family dynamic, because you've treated you've treated my daughter, and you've treated my mom as well. And we noticed that there was something similar. There was a similarity in kind of how we were presenting as this generational presentation, where, there's the cystic breast where, there's nothing wrong, but it just is always like feels lumpy or whatever. And so can we talk about, is it passed down through women in the family?
Certain things are. I mean, if you think about, they say when you want to know when you'll go into menopause, the best determinant is, the closest way to find out is ask your mother when she went into menopause. So there's a connection there. And that links to ovarian function, that links to general hormone balance. And I've often done testing on families, and I'll see the same patterns depending on, there'll be different levels because of age differences, but the pattern will be similar between the family members. So within through the generations, basically.
Interesting.
So yeah, I find that a lot.
Yeah. And okay, so we look at progesterone, we look at estrogen, and how do we balance the hormones? So we come to you and we say, Dr. Patton, what is going on? You go, okay, step one is you might do a urine test or a blood test maybe?
Yeah, depending. So some people will say, well, I can get some blood testing done. So I say, okay, let's start there. Although that maybe is the least useful test, it's still better than no test if that's what we need to find out is something in a test. So we start there. Otherwise, a person might do a dried urine test or a wet urine test. So there's different, types of testing. But what's nice about anything that comes through those means that you can check on some of what are called the metabolites of the hormone. So the whole job, so once a hormone has done its job as a messenger, it needs to leave the body. And there's only certain ways it can leave. And mostly it has to change its form in order to be excreted, as it's called. And it has to go through the liver to change its form. And when it goes through the liver, things are added, things are taken away. And those metabolites, as they're called, can become more potent, less potent, more, concentrated, less concentrated. And that's where some of the problem happens with some people, where their actual hormone balance looks fine, but their metabolites are not, in balance. And then they can even develop, something as challenging as cancer from that. So Suzanne Summers went through an experience where it was a metabolite imbalance that was causing her problem. And it wasn't showing up on the regular blood test.
So like if you have clogged liver. Like if your liver is sludgy and, that could be a real problem, right?
Big time. Yeah, that could be a real problem. So sometimes we will start with the liver in the treatment, or we'll start, for me, one of the key glands is the adrenal glands. And, most kind thing we can do to help ourselves so that when we're 80, we feel good is to take care of our adrenal glands starting at teen year, really, through the lifespan. And the studies show that we're best able to manage our stress in about our age group, funnily enough. So the teens can't be ignored because they're not actually able to handle the stress as well as we are. Even though you would think, well, they're teens. I mean, what do they have to worry about per se? I mean, yes, they do have their social world and they're developing and their brain's still growing, but they don't have as many layers of challenge as we may have or responsibilities. And then you think, well, those who are retired, what's their concern? But their cells, those two age group cells can't handle the stress like ours can.
Wow. So
that's also something not to forget about. And that's why starting in the teens is a way to do it. That's why sports is so helpful for teenagers. And the problem is when they turn about 14, their brain prunes. So it's a natural process where we get rid of some of those neuroplastic connections and you start to focus. So say a student, like let's say my daughter last year claimed and I think she did, play about 7 different sports. Whereas in 2 years, maybe she'll be playing 2 sports. And that's a normal process. But for her hormone health, it might be better she plays 5 sports or 3 sports instead of 2.
And so is that because there's like a release of the toxin through sweating or just action?
Yeah. Well, for example, if it's a hormone overload, the best way to reduce hormone levels is exercise because it calms down our cortisol. It calms down. It helps us excrete our estrogen better. And so with teens, it's very good for stress management. Now, it doesn't have to be sports. It could be other hobbies, but including some exercise is really critical for stress management for teens.
And how is that for like my age?
It's also good.
Oh, good. Okay.
Good. It's very good. But you start the habit in the younger years and then you carry it forward. Usually, it's easier to carry it forward if you start the habit early.
But if you don't...
So like myself on Sunday, I ran a half marathon. And I hadn't run one since before my daughter was born because that took up a lot of my time. That parenting thing.
And how did you do with the half marathon? Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was on a whim. I decided, I heard through my sister that my husband wanted to do it. So I thought, okay, let's sign up. So I signed the 3 of us up. And then I thought, what the was I thinking? And but then I thought, oh well, I've got to do it now.
You make me laugh because this is classic you.
Yes, and then I ran into a running shoe problem, which is a different story, but I got that sorted, and so it impacted my training. So I didn't really train, but I got 20 minutes slower than one in 2004, which wasn't
amazing.
Honestly. Yeah. And my sister said, she goes, if you ever train, I will not run with you. She thought I had way too much energy. So anyway.
Well, I love, and that's what I like about you is that you have a lot of energy and it matches my own actually. But these days I'm not feeling as energized as I need to. And I know that there's a couple of contributing factors. So aside from adrenal fatigue, which we've talked about in a previous episode,
yes,
the liver, and you've said this to me, you said, Lori, your liver, we have to talk about your liver. And I know my liver is sort of giving me the gears. But I've noticed that there's something that's happening. So I might miss a period. And when I missed that period, not this last period, but the period before, missed it. And it was perfect. It was on my vacation. So I didn't actually have a period, which was like bittersweet because I was having these hot flashes and I'm, standing there, it's 80 degrees outside. And I'm like, I just got to take off my clothes a little here because I'm a little hot.
Funny.
and but there's a lot of us out there, right? And so, that's great this is great conversation for teenagers because what you do in your teen years affects you when you are older. And what you do now at our stage affects us when we're older. So you can always right the perceived wrong. If you don't exercise as a teenager, you can right it by doing it now.
Yes, definitely.
But now what do we do? So, you've got, this mismatch of hormone that's coursing through the body. Maybe you've had a whole academic stress in your life. You've gotten married. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have kids and you're whatever. Like, help us navigate what to do when we're starting to feel out of whack. And,
right.
How do we make it now?
Mm-hmm. So if you've addressed the adrenal side, which usually is more of a long-term addressing, I would say, I don't think it's a short-term thing. Mm-hmm. So once that's under, control, and then if you can analyze, so for example, in the Chinese medicine philosophy, anger suppression will damage, and I mean not literally damage, but in the more philosophical sense, the liver. And so even looking at how do we process and how do we communicate can help our hormones. So it just depends on the personality so when I meet a person, and this will sound strange, but they know how to solve their own problem. The person knows. They know. They just don't. They may not be aware of it. That might be the piece. So when I meet them, by the way I interface with them, I can pick up on that, and then they tell me. If you understand the subconscious concept of things are there in our subconscious, and it's not always accessible to each one of us. But if we meet someone who is open to that, like let's say myself interfacing with them, then they tell me where to focus, which sounds extremely strange, but I do use that in my work quite a bit because it's that intuitiveness the person has as to where the problem is. And so then we focus in on that. Now, that doesn't mean if you're not meeting me, you can't still solve your problems. Obviously, you can. And you can start, like I said, in those places. And if that's not working or solving it or only solves half of it, then you have to delve into the literal hormones. And if a person isn't, so if they're at perimenopause, which is any time between 35 and 50, I may, intervene with a hormone, but I will try my best to reserve hormones for times when we really need it, not just randomly say, take a bunch of hormones. Because if we live to 100 and our period ends at 50, we have 50 years without the influence of as many hormones. That we want to live well. We don't want to live poorly for 50 years without hormones. We want to live well. So those are the times to start thinking about the hormones. But if from 45 to 50, the quality of life is terrible because of all these different symptoms and the regular approach isn't working, that's when you do head for hormones because they're very powerful messengers and they can solve the problem. But I wouldn't just say start like popping a bunch of hormone pills or rubbing on a bunch of creams. Get guidance because they're powerful. They are tissue growers. They are tissue changers, hormones. So you don't just want to randomly do it, but they are also, the zest of our life. They give us something. So we need those hormones. And we can't let them dwindle off or stay wildly imbalanced for long periods of time.
I want to pick up on what you said about being intuitive because for me, I realized that when I was having that, when I did miss my period in the summer, right. I had two of both my grandmas passed within 3 months of each other. And right. It was really sad. I was really sad. And then I was working really hard on the show and doing a whole bunch of things, and my life was imbalanced. There was not balance in my life. And my partner said to me, maybe you could take the month off because I think this is having a stress. Like, he's so lovely, right? Like, we've been married 24 years, and he's like, just, like, it might be nice if you just took a little time off. It's okay. Very softly. But he was right. And I took that time and I realized the imbalance of my life. And I think these years that we're talking about, when you're 35 to 50, these are the weird years. You're building your career. You want the house. You're putting your kids through college. There's all these transitions, and it's like you are stressed about things. But tell me how stress and going so strong and so hard at life can imbalance the hormone.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about it is that our bodies are extremely efficient. Our bodies are extremely resilient. And that can be a detriment too, because we can push and push and push and push and push and still get through, get by, get on with it, and really almost escape the penalty of that at some level, if you want to call it a penalty. We don't have to pay for it right now. But the problem with that is you do pay for it. And you see this more, maybe even in men, actually. You see this more in men. Even though they do have the protection of testosterone, which is a stress protector, perhaps they are impacted more when that level drops because it is such a protector. And so that's when you see, as they call them, the widowmaker heart attacks happen, or, a person retires and then they're dead in a year. Now, these are more dramatic stories, of course, and that's not most of us. But they're trying to, I'm mentioning them to make a point, which is that you do pay for that stress on the system. Now, as someone, I was trying to explain to them, there's a concept called eustress. So you can't have no stress. You can't just sit there and zen out all day and assume that's going to work for you, because our bodies are meant to have stress. But you want to have a stress that gives you that endorphin exposure, or that gives you a positive feeling at the end of the experience, not a negative feeling. And so you want stress, but you have to have the right type of stress. That's the key. And so when you have too many things like death is, they talk about the major life stressors: moving, loss, even changing a job. Those can be what are called major life stressors. And if you have 2 or 3 piling up and you just say, well, forget about that, I'll deal with it later, it's not going to work forever to be doing that. And you do pay for it. I've seen it. And that's what I have the gift of my work, which is I get to see and I'm not saying I wish this on anyone, but I happen to get to see people who pay for it later. And so what it's taught me is, how can we be those people to take action now, prevent it, promote ourselves? Now, it doesn't mean you say, well, look at you, what you did. No, it's about, okay, even that person in that moment can have their wake-up call then. So you always can start where you're at, but we can learn from each other. We can learn from our parents. So in my generation of my parents, they weren't super active people because they weren't brought up in that exercise world. So they don't have those practices, and that does impact them. Whereas I had that practice. My daughter has that practice. Maybe her daughter or son will have that practice. So that changes things. And so that's one thing I learned. And we all can look at what can we learn. So it's not about, so you might not see the impact of it right away. That's the point.
Well, and for men, I think that's amazing, because I was going to ask you about men and their hormone, because I don't know if men really think about it much. And no. Can you weigh in on that for me? Because I don't know if they do. And I think that's, all of a sudden the guy's walking around and all of a sudden he looks at pictures then a year later and he notices he's got a little bit more of a belly, or, he's maybe not measuring 35 around the waist. And everyone says, oh, that's a beer belly or barrel chested or whatever they're saying. And perhaps it's because a lot of men they work hard. And we're not talking about women working hard right now. We're talking about men working hard. Men are working hard. And this must affect them. So can we talk about that man who's listening on behalf of his daughter, and now he's going to realize something maybe for himself?
Yeah. So the positive thing for men is they do have testosterone. They have, I think it's 30 times as much as we have. So, and that will protect their cells from aging in a sense 10 times more than ours. So that's a positive for them. But there comes a time where those levels, they call it, when like the men go through andropause, like women go through menopause, or low T is the term they might be using, or whatever you want to call it. But there's a change in their body shapes, just like for women as well, at a certain time in life. And like one of my patients came in looking for weight loss, and he said, yeah, I want to lose my A cup. Right. So again, that's when that's a hormonal change for men, and not everyone experiences that. But for those who do, perhaps that's something that would let them know. Oh, okay, maybe I'm going through low T, or I'm having a hormonal change. Now they may not care about that, but they will care. If they get a heart attack from it, that'll probably make them think, oh, okay, this is too bad. And so they probably. Although men do exercise, men do physical activity, not all of them are as in touch with the communication, the emotion, the spiritual, the stress management. Now, one thing I did notice though is in yoga class a couple of weeks ago, more than half the class was men. So it's probably changing now. There's a shift, and so that's good, but is there enough of a shift? It's hard to say.
Well, and that's why we're starting this conversation, to basically say, hey, this is an important conversation to have if you're thinking about how to, adjust your life, or this is it. Now, the adrenal glands are interesting to me because they are responsible for a lot of hormone firing, right? Like they fire off the what? What do they do?
Well, in the hormonal cascade, they're higher up in a sense. A number of hormones can be made from hormones that come from the adrenal glands. So if those deplete, then downstream hormones all deplete. And then, so that's one way how they have an impact. It's in the production of hormones that comes from other hormones linked to the adrenals. And, especially if a lot of us now work longer, so not everyone, retirement's changing. Because in the past, people would retire and then they would die. I mean, that was the reality. Now people live a lot longer. And so they're maybe not going to change. They're still going to be doing some type of paid work or non-paid work for longer. And so they actually need to, because again, as our cells age, we don't handle stress as well. That might force some men and women, especially men though, in this case, to address the stress issue as time goes on, especially if they want to keep working. So, for example, I went to the ULOC storage facility here in our local area, and all but two of the employees I met are a bunch of retired guys who have now a new job, in the ULOC storage. And they're amazing. They're happy. They're doing great work. Yet their health, again, I pick up on it because that's my field, is impacted to some degree. So how do they optimize themselves? And they could start at the adrenal glands for sure.
For sure. And so, okay, let's move down the line. Now, what do? We've had this conversation. We have a level of understanding. What is next for the teenager, for the woman who's had the baby, for the man? What's next for people in general when they realize, okay, there's something wrong or something out of balance? They come to you, they go to someone else. They go through some tests, and then what?
Mm-hmm. So then, I mean, if it's a teen, commonly you look at, like I said, exercise, you look at diet, because you can shift hormones based on your diet in a big way. And with teens, sometimes they naturally figure it out. So like my daughter went to visit my sister. My sister's a vegetarian, and they do a lot of, they make their own kombucha. They do a lot of, nutritional yeast. They do all kinds of things. And so then she came home and suddenly buys kombucha. And I thought, whoa, what's going on? Not that she wasn't aware of it for many years, not that I didn't show her it for many years, but she was never interested. And then suddenly she was. So sometimes they start to change naturally, and other times they need a little nudging from someone else. And so and it might not really be effective coming from a parent. They're not necessarily listening to the parent.
Right.
Like in my case.
Yeah, or in
my daughter was on this. Which is fine. But
I'm begging you to go and see Dr. Patton.
Yeah, right. And often I'll say, especially again to the teens and to the guys, oh, how did you get here? Your wife, your mother, your, whoever. And that's usually the way. So I don't actually mind how they get here, but it kind of lightens the mood, because they don't really want to be there at first, a lot of the people.
I know. And because again, that's the men. The man's like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Right.
I'm fine. And what could you do to help me anyhow? I mean, really, what could you do to help me?
You do. Well, let me tell you what we could do. Okay, so just at the end of this interview, let's talk about what if your estrogen level falls? What happens? Mm-hmm. And what do we do?
You've seen a raisin, right? That's not a good example, but that's what things shrivel, things dry up.
Seen a raisin. I just sit there and wait. I wanted you to explain it even further.
Yeah, so things happen because estrogen's a critical hormone.
Okay.
If you look at a woman who has menopause 5 years later, not every woman, okay, so don't get me wrong, I'm not generalizing, but some, you see a dramatic change in 5 years from when they finish their period, and then you see them 5 years later, dramatic change, and then it just keeps going. And I was in a room with a bunch of gynecologists, and they were talking about hormones, and there's a certain protocol that was followed, and it changes all the time. But the truth was, deep down in the actual conversation, they're not all following the protocol, let's say when it comes to themselves or their families, because the truth is, you want to do what works. So if you know that hormones are critical and that as we age, they just get lower, and that impacts the bone, the heart, the liver, the muscles, the skin.
Yeah.
And you can do something about it, why wouldn't you do it? That's the thing. It's just not everybody knows that that's the issue.
Okay, so when an estrogen level, when it changes, you're going to see something in one or two ways, right?
Usually you do. And some women happen to have a really healthy level, so it's not as extreme, the effect. So they might say, well, I'm fine. And so they might get a delayed effect. And although they'll say, well, you shouldn't start women looking at their hormones 10 years after menopause, but maybe that's when that woman notices the change finally.
Right. And
so
what about progesterone? Because when we were talking, you were saying to me, I should clarify, when we were talking in your office, you were saying to me, you have to get the estrogen out of the body because I am estrogen dominant. And so you're saying you got to raise progesterone, and you have to take some T1s or whatever that is because, talk about this.
Very good. So in certain cases, there's something called, so if there's ever an estrogen progesterone imbalance, it could be that estrogen's too high and progesterone's normal. It could be that estrogen's normal, progesterone's too low. It could be that estrogen's low and progesterone's low, but one's lower. So you have to figure out what is the issue and how to fix it.
Okay.
And that's why sometimes if I try to help people process estrogen better, you don't want to overdo that either because you need estrogen. So again, you have to, if only it was a cookie cutter recipe book response for everyone, it would be nice. And some people, like I had a patient who the other day said, well, my daughter was prescribed this dose of pregnenolone. Why did you prescribe me this dose? And I said, well, who knows? I mean, at some level, I like to start low, because why pour something in someone, especially if it's a hormone that's powerful, if you end up getting an answer at a lower dose. But it doesn't mean a higher dose can't be also very effective. So again, it really depends.
And when you're getting it out of the body, that T1, right? Like it has to carry out of the body. Otherwise it goes somewhere in the body, right? It stores.
Right. So in terms of, it's through the liver, and it's linked to the metabolites of estrogen. And so once it's changed in the liver, if it doesn't leave the body, then it can get reabsorbed in that more potent form. And that's when problems arise. Okay. And so I don't know what you mean quite about T1, but you might mean to do with phase 1 or phase 2 of the liver. I'm not totally sure, but
I read your notes to me in a thing, and it was P1, so it might have been P1, like part 1, part 2.
Yeah, it could have been part 1, part 2 to do with the liver, the phase 1 and 2 of the liver. Yeah, that's probably more what it was. And so you're just trying to, and some of us have problems with some of our detoxification pathways in our liver. And you can prove that with testing as well. Or, you can know. So sometimes, for example, glutathione can be used as a treatment for hormones when it's a liver treatment, actually. But it improves our hormone balance because we're improving the liver function.
Right. And if you're trying to get rid of stuff and the liver is sluggish.
Right. And then, of course, in the pathophysiology field, they might say, well, the liver, what do you mean by the liver is sluggish? Well, it's just more to do with, and they can do this genetically now, analyze it in our lifestyle genes and in the gene analysis. You can check out how your gene changes impact your liver function, and you can determine that for people, whether that's an issue or not.
I think this is an important way to wrap up, because what I'm hearing is, if you're feeling or seeing a difference in your body or your mental capacity, just your general feeling, and you have some symptoms, the thing that we talked about at the very, very beginning is hormones are complex. And you've been saying this. It's like there's not really one way to answer the question.
No, there isn't.
There's not one way. It's like I'm looking for an answer, and you're giving me everything you can. The reality is there's a lot of ways that you would encourage someone to manage or to to get a hold on this. And the first thing I think you're saying is, you got to think about how and what you're internalizing and what you're eating, because that can actually change the hormone imbalance. And not to take and jump on that wagon of taking some, hormone, because you don't really want to do that. You really want to try to do all these other things before you move to a cream or a pill or something like that. Is that right?
That's definitely wise. And there's another concept. I mean, some people will say, well, when I went on the pill, I felt much better. I was more even. Or when I went on this antidepressant, I felt more even, which is great. So if that works for you, then do that. Then there's another philosophy whereby it doesn't mean things are great all the time. So if you've ever read the book called The Red Tent, and this is an older book now, but it talks, and there's other writers who talk about the gifts of hormonal imbalance. Now, not extreme. Obviously, I'm not suggesting extreme, but I'm talking about the natural ebb and flow of our hormones. Why, right before a period, does a woman get kind of edgy, that she doesn't want to be around people? The reason being is she's meant to go into a cave and think. She's meant to pull away. She's meant to sleep more. She's meant to eat, nurturing foods. She might even clean her house. She's meant to be doing those things. The problem is we're out of touch with that way of life. So we want to fix it. We want to say, get this edginess out of me. But maybe it's just more, okay, this is where I am. And that's why they made these period trackers. This is where I am in my cycle. it's not way off track. It's just a little off track. I can handle this, and I'm going to use this time to go inside and do what I need to do on this, issue. And then you can make more peace with it. But perhaps it's not the hormones that's the problem. It's the lack of connection to what those hormones mean and the power in those hormones. So it's totally possible because, and for men too, the power of our hormones, is what life's about. It's just we're not, honing in and connecting into it enough. And that's what I want to leave people with.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That's like right up my alley because you're right. We try to walk away from something that's so natural.
Yeah.
Right? Like when our teenagers and our kids, I've got 3 olders, right? So I've got one more that's going to venture that way. But for now, let's just leave it where she's 10, right? So, but I remember when my kids all started making their adjustments. And I remember saying to them, here's the deal. We are not going to verbally assault one another. We're going to get out of bed and we're going to be happy people. You're not making our lives hell in this home. Number 1. Number 2, there's a reason why this is happening to your body. And you must connect in. So turn inward and look at, okay, is there something that I'm angry about? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And keep going. Have the conversation.
Right. And then because what happens is once you go into that, then you come out of it, right? Because they shift again. And then you go into your action and you do something new. That's where the resiliency comes from. You start a new project, you take on a new job, whatever it may be. And so what's a gift for a woman is that she gets that every month. She gets to go through that every month. So that's a huge power. With a guy, probably it's a little bit different. And maybe, yes, they have more of a steadiness. So they can handle, different types of projects. Mm-hmm. But then are they equipped when things start to trail off because they are also living longer? And so that's where the woman can come into play to help the guy with that because she knows the feeling because she goes through it every month.
Well, and this is another important part because I must have been living under a rock somewhere because I didn't get this. It was so weird. Allison, honestly, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but for those teenagers out there, I'll go there so that I don't embarrass myself further. But I just like in May of this year realized that there were 4 seasons in the month as a woman. It's like that you've got the fall season where things fall away and, the earth prepares itself and everything exhales. And then you've got this place in your life where it's winter and you're cozying up and you're all, you are getting rid of that, that everything that happens when you're having your period, all the shedding and letting go and getting rid of toxins. And then you go back to spring where things are becoming alive again. And you're like, oh, and you get creative and you're in and you're, and then it's summer, you're partying, you're loving life. And then you're back down again. You think about the up and down of that. If we can wrap our minds around that and give ourselves the permission, then to be imbalanced in a natural way, the way that every week is asking us, it's every week is asking us to just move down a little bit more, deeper, and then come up again. That's the ebb and flow. Yes,
that's right. And there was this article I read in my MBA called The Corporate Athlete, and it talked about the oscillation. So think about interval training. So if you're an athlete, you do interval training. But in our cycle, it's a natural interval training. So, and the learning happens, keep in mind, the learning happens not at the low, not at the high, but in the movement. That's where all the gifts come. And so think about that. And so the challenge is faced when the 4 weeks have too much of 1 week. So in other words, some patients will tell me, 3 weeks of the month, it's like this. And then I have my period. So then in that case, yes, we probably need to make a change because they're not getting that ebb and flow. And so then, yes, we would intervene then. But otherwise, some of this, like, let's say it is your teenager, maybe you do want to just leave them in their room for a week, at times to manage that piece for themselves, because they also have to learn how to self-regulate.
Well, and that's
right?
the power of, and that's what I was saying to my daughters. And my little daughter, she's not on that journey yet, but she's learning. And I've always said, like, to Ireland, okay, let's embrace this, what it is. You're not going to be angry for 4 weeks. We're not doing that. And she never was. She was right. Amazing. You must learn. And it's so interesting to me because, yes, that hormone becomes when all of a sudden you're in the middle of school and you're doing what you're doing, and now you've got your period and you're like, but it is a gift that helps you interval train for what life is about. The downside, girls are getting their period younger and younger and younger.
Yes, that's true. And that links more to, what's happening, like even, at City Hall, for example. So we're learning about tertiary water treatment. Okay. And I thought, what's that got to do with anything? But what it has to do with is when you treat the water in a different way, you can pull the hormones out of the water. If you don't go to that level of water treatment, you don't get the hormones out of the water. So then they're getting recycled into the system of everybody. And that's why there used to be the stories about, the changes to the alligators in Florida or whatnot. And so that's linked to the hormone, because hormones are really tough to get out of water. It's you have to treat it a certain way. And so then if you add that to, the plastics, and yes, they've handled all these things. Like now they know not to use a certain type of plastic. Now they're trying to treat the water differently. But we have the catch up from all that still.
Right. And it's in our system. It leaches in, right? Like we've never been more of a packaged society. Everything's in a package, It's like,
well, even the tea, I was reading this article about the fancier teas that are made in kind of like a mesh. Those actually are harmful to us. There's little bits of plastic that leach out of that, and then we drink the tea, and it goes into our body, and it's hard to get rid of those little plastic bits. And you think, really? Even in my designer tea, it's a problem.
I know, and I was thinking about that too, and that's why I was talking with my son Finn about loose leaf tea, and he was like, "Oh, okay, Mom, what are we going to do about that?" And because he and I both read the same article, and he said, "Yeah, what should we do?" And we talked about that, and but that's the other contributing factor. So not only are we've got a lot of hormone and a lot of things in other things, and that really shouldn't be there and weren't there way back when, right? So we're trying to change it, but it's slow.
It is slow, and so then that's why the kids of today are getting their periods at 10, because it's a layering effect of all those other things that maybe we've solved, but the effect of them hasn't been solved yet. It's still hanging around in the body.
Well, and then they're having to deal with that hormonal adjustment so early. It's just like, I mean, we have to deal with it because that's what is actually happening in our society. But it doesn't mean that I like it. It means I actually feel sad. I look at people that are young women who are 11 years old, and I think, no.
Right.
Like 13 is hard enough.
That's true. It's true. And they're not really developmentally ready to, not all of them are ready to even talk about it. So you kind of have to slip it to them, slip them some supplies, have it there for them without discussing it, until they are a little bit older, some of them.
Yeah.
So a parent has to kind of figure it out to help them, because they may not even want to talk about it, actually.
So give us a takeaway if you're a teenager. What's the takeaway from this conversation?
Well, I think if it's sort of similar to if it's an adult. If it feels off, it is. So if not always would a teenager connect it, but if they could, if something doesn't feel right in their body, it probably isn't. So tell someone who you trust. Tell your parent, right? Usually it's a parent, or If you can't tell your parent, tell your friend who may tell your parent or a grandparent. And because it doesn't mean you should suffer with it if it's really bothering you. And there's probably a solution, and that solution might not have to be a drug. You know, it might easily be something you're eating, an exercise, taking up a new type of like yoga, whatever it may be. So don't just assume, don't just disconnect from it, in other words.
And what's the takeaway if you're a woman, you're mother, you're in your 30s? What's the takeaway there?
Well, I mean, depending where you're at, if you're trying to become pregnant, if you're in your fertile time and you're planning that, then think about, okay, what are my lifestyle practices and how's that going to impact, which we didn't talk much about today, but how's that going to impact my ability to, become pregnant, for example, or so whenever it's pregnancy, there's always something. It's either getting pregnant, it's the pregnancy, it's after pregnancy, it's breastfeeding. There's some issue that pops up for the woman. So it's trying to navigate that phase, which might be a whole nother hour of discussion.
And it is another discussion because I would like to invite you back for that, because I just did a show with a woman named Lucy, and we were just talking about the postpartum recovery, not the postpartum depression, but more about postpartum recovery. She had her third baby, and it was really hard. The recovery after, everything hurt and all of that, and the cramping was really, really surprising to her. And she said to me, look, nobody told me this. And it was the same feeling I had with my son Tate, who's my third born as well. We want to talk about that because a lot of women feel defined by motherhood. They have these careers, they become a mom, and all of a sudden you feel like you've lost yourself. You feel like all of that, you're not getting enough sleep. You feel like you're just in a state of brain fog. How do we manage that? So I would like you to, if you would, come back and talk about that. But that's great. Then the next person would be like, if you're me, you've missed your period, you're in your 40s. Now what do we do?
Yeah, and I mean, I think 40s, when you have kids that are, depending on the age of the kids, but if you have kids, but let's say you have kids and they're kind of in the teen years or older or younger, but you're looking ahead. I mean, yes, you're living in the moment, but there's a piece of you looking ahead, because like my example is, I went to an event. My daughter wasn't with me. She was away at a sport event with my husband, and I'm there with adults around other families, but I have no family around me. I just have friends. I'm doing an adulting episode, and I thought, oh, this is really weird. This is my future. This will be my future. And so you're sort of, for me, I'm a planner, so I'm already thinking, okay, who is the me in 5 years? Who's the me in 10 years? Because this piece is coming not to an end, but it's sort of changing. And so this age group is, in a way, should be, in my opinion, if you want to go with a should, preparing, yes, living for today, yes, growing into the next phase, but preparing for the next phase. So it's not a big shock to them because it will be a big transition.
And that would fall right into what we just talked about the seasons, because that self-introspection, turning inward, not always looking. And I would like to add, changing the dialogue about the hormones and the menstrual cycle as being a pain.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. It's natural and normal within reason, something to be embraced, not kind of shunned or fixed or put, having to make better necessarily.
Exactly. If you're a male and you are listening to this, what is the takeaway for a male?
Well, I think for a male, it's have a conversation, not be open enough to be willing to consider this as something that you might want to address. Because if you can do that, then later in life, it's better for the man, because they do get impacts on their health, and they may not even, they may just accept those impacts, but why should they accept them? So why not do something about it a little earlier? And then you have to talk about it in order to deal with it, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree. Well, this has been awesome. Like I always love talking to you, and I like seeing you in person as well.
Yes. Well, thanks. This has been great. And I hope we can do it again sometime and talk about these types of important, things that matter to me, and I hope they matter to others.
Yeah, I agree. And as we collaborate together, I think that this is where the conversation gets really good, because there's no question I want to have you back. And I've got a list of topics to talk to you about. I like your candid nature, but I also like how you talk about the emotion, and you're connecting the body and emotion together with well-being as well. Because you know what? The body is the densest part of the soul. The body does reflect back what we are putting out to the world around us. And that's a good, solid offering of wisdom that you've just given us today. I just appreciate it so much. Now, if somebody is looking to find you, where can they find you?
Our clinic is called Mountain View Wellness Center. We're in South Story, White Rock. They can call our clinic. They can look on our website. They can follow me on Instagram.
Yes.
You can see me at Surrey City Hall Monday nights, every other Monday, but I'm not sure you necessarily would find that super interesting unless you love land development. But anyhow, we'll leave it at that.
Yes, and if you're a listener, you can find us at www.laurieclark.ca. You can also email in if you have any questions that you want to talk to Dr. Patton about, or with me. You can email us at the Laurie Clark Team at gmail.com. So, and of course, I'm on Instagram too. So, but thank you so much for coming. I absolutely appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Take care, Laurie. See you next time.
Bye.